Tom, aka Gerion here for Star Frontiers Gamer, and we've got the fourth primer on playing Verse. We have the new player primer, the Yazarian, playing Yazarians and playing Drolocytes, and now we're doing the player primer for the Vrusk, which was developed in Frontier Explorer number 20, which will basically be the script for today's video. But there's bonus material to this in that there's been some new Vrusk articles that were written in the past year. And, so we're going to also touch on those because the Vrusk were the most undeveloped player character race as far as fan material goes for a long time, and they seem to be the least popular player character race amongst the fans, and that might be why they were the most undeveloped. Where the Yazarians and the Drolocytes get all the love, but in the last year, there's been a lot of activity in writing and developing Vrusk material, and I think this is fantastic. So we will touch on that material at the very end of the video and where you can locate it. Now let's get to it. So the canon material. The Vrusk species are a bug-like species with an internal skeleton and an external carapace. They're ambidextrous and with double-jointed arms on an upright torso and 8 legs on a lower horizontal body. You can actually think of the Vrusk as being like a bug centaur. Would be a good way of envisioning the Vrusk. So here's the classic, what we like to call the autopsy pics in the player character species, and so you see the structure is very, very well laid out like a centaur. You could describe them as like a bug centaur, very much. Due to their complex society, they have a special comprehension ability that allows them to pick up on social cues, to read social interactions, to understand social dynamics in a given situation. Society. Most Vrusk belong to independent corporations called either trade houses or conglomerates. A conglomerate would be like the equivalent of several trade houses that have banded together. As with any society, there are members that do not fit into the standard molds for Vrusk. These are independent business owners, adventurers, etc. They are often considered somewhat odd by the more traditional Vrusk. Vrusk society is highly structured and complicated with various levels of connection, obligation, relationship between the various corporations and members within these corporations. The interactions are often subtle and complex, and usually only a Vrusk can fully understand what is going on. This has given rise to their racial comprehension ability. Compared to Vrusk society, other races' interactions are relatively simple. So let me comment on the comprehension ability. All of the racial abilities that have a percentage chance for success in the Alpha-Don rules, you have battle rage, 5% for Yazarian, lie detection, 5% for Drolocyte, comprehension, 15%. I always thought this must be a typo, but I was recently rereading the description of the Vrusk in the book, and even in the description there, it keeps saying 15%, 15%. So it doesn't come off as a typo, like a oops, we didn't catch that in editing type of thing, but it comes off as like it's intentional, which makes me wonder where was it that maybe they were debating between 5% and 15%, and so then they were like, you know what, they really needs to be 15, and they never changed it for the Drolocyte and Yazarians, because I've always kind of flip-flopped on they should just all be 5%, or let's just throw everybody a bone and make them all 15, so battle rage starts at 15, because it's always a joke in the game. Well, I'll roll my 5% lie detection, and the player rolls it knowing they're not going to get it, but they just roll it for that shot in the dark that they do get it. So I've often vacillated on whether to just throw everybody a bone and make it 15. But as I was preparing for this, I really became convinced this 15 is not a typo for the verse. It seems intentional that they wanted the verse to have that 15%. That's just my take on it. You, of course, can rule otherwise. And you wouldn't be the first person to be like, why is it 5 over there for the Drolicites and Yazarians and 15 over here for the verse? And it just could be that they expected verse to get the least amount of love. And so they said, let's bump them up a little bit with this 15. And again, for 5 EXP, you could jump that 15% up to 20, and you've got a solid 1 in 5 chance of succeeding on that. 20% is not great, but it's also not, it's also not bad. It's not like 5%. So if I was playing a Vrusk, I would definitely channel some 5 EXP fairly early into that 15, onto that 15% comprehension score. Vrusk are great lovers of beauty and art, and they aspire to become wealthy art collectors. Both natural and creative beauty can captivate a verse for hours if given the opportunity to take time to enjoy it. Vrusk often work to preserve and enhance the beauty they find in the world around them. Language. All right, I'm going to read what I wrote all those years ago. The Vrusk language is unspeakable by other species of the frontier, but the Vrusk understand Pangal. They use a polyvox to communicate. Now, this is that Han Solo Chewbacca situation where obviously Han Solo understands Wookiee, but he don't speak it. And obviously Chewbacca understands whatever language Han Solo's speaking. We'll call it English, but in setting it might have another name. He understands that, but he cannot speak it. So you have that interesting byplay going on with them. Let's just see what the book says on Vrusk speech. The Vrusk speak by combining clicks produced through their mandibles and buzzes produced by a plate in their mouths. Polyvox. So here's the description of a polyvox. A specialized computer, can be worn around the throat. It can learn new languages. Character does not need computer skill to use a polyvox. Basically, it's the universal translator from Star Trek, and it doesn't elucidate anything about the Vrusk needing it to communicate. Jumping to page 52, all intelligent species in the known galaxy have a native language. Here we're under languages. In order to simplify interstellar trade, Pan-Galactic Corporation created Pan-Galactic, a language of sounds and gestures that can be spoken by almost any intelligent speaking creature. It does not sound quite the same when spoken by members of different races, but anyone who speaks Pan-Galactic can understand a creature speaking Pan-Galactic because of its usefulness. Pan-Galactic is spoken on almost every world that has contact with the Pan-Galactic Corporation or one of the 4 major races. Jumping over, and polyvoxes. And so here's further elucidation on the polyvox. A polyvox is a small computerized device, translates what it hears from one language, and repeats it in another. Polyvoxes and language tapes for all known languages can be bought wherever general computer equipment is sold. Language tapes. That's so adorable. So cassette tapes, hi-fi. Sold. Polyvox can also learn a new language. It can be programmed with key phrases. And then here the spoken language for D100 hours. More information on polyvoxes is given in the section on equipment. Almost identical information on polyvoxes is given in the section on equipment. And then other barriers here. And this is just a suggestion to using language barriers to cause problems within the game. So there is nothing that says a Vrusk has to have a polyvox to communicate, other than that very first, our introduction to the verse, that very first autopsy pic in the character description does depict the polyvox being worn on the neck of the Vrusk. And we have that explicit description that their whole language is clicks and buzzes, which, if that's how they make language sounds, that I think that's the source of this interpretation, this fan interpretation, that they must use a polyvox. I'm going to continue for my game enforcing that, look, a verse just uses a polyvox. They understand Pangal, they hear it spoken, they don't need it translated to them. But they respond in Vrusk, and the polyvox then tweets it out. In Frontiersman, Frontier Explorer number 5, we get a verse, life, and song. Now, this is material. I found material by Bradley McMillan about the verse respiratory system and how they use it to sing, with the spiracles in their abdomen, how they force air in or out, and so on, and how they can actually use this to sing. And I thought it was fascinating material, but it was found through the Wayback Machine and the Lost Star Frontiers websites that were, from back around 1999, 2000, back then. And this material was lost, and so I brought it forward, made people aware of it. It was discussed in the old school forums, and then further material was developed, like this idea of flicking emotions with the antenna. That they do all this clicking and buzzing, but then to add emotional, they use their antennas to flick an emotion to add it adds a, because the Vrusk face doesn't really smile. It's hard carapace. They don't have the muscles and the flexible skin like a Drollicite or a human or a Yuzarian. So their way of conveying emotions when they speak is they flick it with their antenna. This was something we developed, and I thought it was a great idea, so I wrote it up here. I then, expanding upon Bradley McMillan's material, I did this, talked about verse Tai Chi, there's song and dance. Somebody else contributed this idea of the solidarity or the sodality dance as a corporate function, because the Japanese corporations are, verse corporations are really modeled on Japanese corporate structure. And so this idea of them getting together and doing this dance, and then humans interpreting it as verse Tai Chi, I wrote a little bit about that. Then I reprinted Bradley McMillan's material here so that it was available in print. People could access it. And then I wrote this little piece of fiction about a Vrusk in two worlds. This was a Vrusk who had been, the Royal Marines had captured a pirate ship that was crewed entirely by Vrusk. More than likely, it was a ship employed by the Vrusk Mafia, the Zinc. And so the boarding action didn't go well, and all the adults died or resisted right to the end and didn't survive. But you had this child, Vrusk, basically an innocent, is now orphaned. And the crown looked to see if there was a Vrusk trade house that would take him in, but because he is the orphan of criminals, all these respectable trade houses like, nope, we're good here. So he ended up in the foster care system on the planet Clarion. And and this is all in here. So he has this perspective of growing up in a human family but being an outsider. And then he goes off to college and he starts to interact with other Vrusk. He encounters this Vrusk solidarity dance. And the first time he participates, it's like an epiphany, and it's like, it's like, I've come home to my people. And so he's a Vrusk in two worlds, because he's now specialized in college in understanding Vrusk culture and history, but he also understands humans. And so it's just a little piece of fiction exploring that. His name was VI-K''TR, also known as Victor the Vrusk, for which he was teased as a child in the school system on Clarion. So this is a great first look by fans into verse society and culture. A little bit more development on it, and so this is Frontier Explorer number 5. The next real development by fans of the verse society came in Frontier Explorer number 32 by a good friend of mine, and that was An Industrious Life, a look at the life of the average Vrusk. And so this covers, pregnancy and birth, childhood and education, joining the company, leisure pursuits, company life, pair bonding and parenthood, changing jobs, spirituality, old age and death, and stepping outside the system. So this was a great examination of society, particularly from the perspective of a verse within a corporate setting. Also in this issue is the verse hustler archetype. This leverages that verse comprehension where they can read the room, they can read the situation, they know what's going on. Oh, that guy's planning something, that sort of thing. So as a hustler, hustlers read people. They're really good at it, and it's just leveraging that Vrusk ability. And so this was an examination of playing a Vrusk hustler. And and I love this illustration by Aaron O'Brien. This is an aged Vrusk who is frail in body, but is making up for it with an exoskeleton. I just think that's cool. I just think that's so, plus he's walking with a cane that just says, "Oh, I'm struggling here." And, meanwhile, he's pickpocketing this woman's purse that she's wearing over the shoulder and lifting her card to steal her credits. And then this article, because I was looking for this material, this new equipment I added to this hustler archetype, and it was lockpick set, lockpick tool set, a Jericho device. Jericho device is an electronic device to aid in picking locks. The sleight of hand, generic sleight of hand, and or magic prop. There's a lot of things that are used sometimes by hustlers for tricking people, and but they're purchased right at the magic store. You would go to where people buy, sell, and trade, magic props. So these would be your loaded dice. A hustler might want a pair of loaded dice. Loaded dice, thumb tip, double wall bag, Svengali deck of cards. So I just included these things don't really have, they have a negligible weight, but they run 5 to 25 credits. So it's, what is it you want? If it's thumb tip, 5 credits. Double wall bag, 20 credits. Svengali deck, 15. I would just, but those are real world magic props, tricks. You could totally invent, something in the sci-fi setting, and so the price should be flexible in about, and these are very small concealable type of things. So I just included them there. Mastercrafted pool cue or similar gaming equipment. The hustler might not go in for doing the 3-card Monty. He might not go in for the confidence games. He might just go in for the the classic hustling at the pool table. Now, I've done these quality pricings of a quality game implement, like a pool stick, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, it could be Domjot, if you want to rip off Star Trek: The Next Generation. Just don't piss off the Nausicaans. Important note to self. That tends to end badly unless there's a good doctor handy. But the gaming equipment here is for buying that upgraded gaming equipment to get the slightly better performance out of it. Not just the cheap, is it straight? You're looking down the shaft to see if it's straight pool cue at the pool hall. So better quality prices. I'm not even sure about the 1 kilogram case being a thing. I kind of put it in there as a placeholder. I mean, we are talking just a wide variety of gaming equipment that's possible. So I just threw in 1 kilogram. You can modify that as you see fit. So these things are, they're buried in the Vrusk Hustler article. And it's another great resource if you're playing a Vrusk. I would totally go in for playing a Vrusk Hustler. I have a friend who only plays, he says, I only play evil characters. This would be something I would offer him if I got him to sit in on a Star Frontiers game. So you want to play a Vrusk Hustler? You want to play a Hustler? He doesn't even have to play a Vrusk. Just play a Hustler type character. I mean, and the other reason for the Vrusk Hustler being an archetype, besides their comprehension, is they have the fastest speed of all the player character races. So if the jig is up and you got to run, a Vrusk could do it. And the last thing that is, and again, these are all in the past year, is Frontier Explorer number 33. You get the Vrusk name generator here. Now, this is a great addition. I love this because sometimes people are like, I don't know what to make. Look, Vrusk name generator. I love a random table. They're just handy sometimes. Although when I've been naming Vrusk, I generally find a name that I want it to be their cool name, like Ricky Tick. And then I take all the vowels out and I put in apostrophes and dashes. And so this is the Vrusk name, and it looks weird and alien, but to his friends, he's called Ricky Tick. That's his nickname. And so that's what I do. If it's Spock, then I would just drop the P and the O and be, S dash apostrophe CK. It looks weird, but to his friends, they call him Spock because they don't speak Vrusk. They can't pronounce Vrusk. It's all clicks and buzzes. So that's how I handle naming. But I do like this name generator table. And also in this particular issue, you get, where is it? Solar Miner System Brief, which is a Vrusk system. And so this is a system brief going into it's a Vrusk human system actually. So it goes into a lot of depth exploring this system and cultural notes and quirks for people coming from this particular system, rivalries, last lots. This was a great piece of exploring and painting in of of a corner of the frontier that I would not have considered doing. I would have been like, all right, let's paint in a corner of the frontier where the Vrusk live. I would have gone to the Vrusk loop up there, Turtledrum and all those, Fromeltar, Turtledrum, and then all of those Vrusk colonies on that jump loop on the map, and not gone down here to Solar Miner where it's actually Vrusk and humans living together. So this was great, and I just thought Oscar Rios did a fantastic job with this system brief, and because he thought of things that I had not thought of, and I love that kind of challenge when in other writers. I'm like, oh man, I never thought of that. That's really good. I like that stuff, and that's the kind of thing I eat up. So this issue, you get the Vrusk name generator and you get this great system brief. So there you have playing Vrusk. There are a lot of resources. For a long time there weren't, but all of a sudden the past year there's been a lot of Vrusk stuff written and submitted to the magazine. So I think that's fantastic. And so in the past year there's been more development. Thanks to Oscar for championing that. He was like, I want to create stuff that hasn't been done before, and so he challenged me to do a grand glossary of the frontier where we charted in a spreadsheet every article ever written up through issue 30. And so that aided in being able to research what had been written before. And then he was like, I want to paint in a corner of the frontier and put my stamp on it. And I says, well, there's not been much done with the Vrusk. And he went to town on that, developing a whole verse system. He set his game that he was running in that system, and so the player characters were having adventures in Solar Minor. So Oscar's done a great job thinking about the Vrusk, exploring their society, exploring their corporate culture, and he's written on it. So you have some great resources here from him, and just wanted to give a little shout out to him because I thought he did fabulous work. So that's playing a Vrusk. There's some interesting stuff there to do with them. The Vrusk Pistolero is a Vrusk archetype from the early Star Frontiersmen, and that leverages their ambidexterity. That there's no penalty for shooting two weapons because they're ambidextrous, whereas other players have. Not only do other players have a penalty for shooting two weapons, you also get a penalty for shooting with your offhand. Like I'm right-handed, so no offhand penalty for things shot from my right hand, but there is an offhand penalty from shooting with the left. So an ambidextrous Vrusk only has to deal with that one penalty. So with a little bit of skill, bump it up, your shooting skill up to at least third level, you're gonna be putting a lot of lead downrange. Like say gyrojets, it's 3 shots each gun, so you have 6 dice rolls to hit in a turn. And if you're using specialized ammunition, it's from one of those early Star Frontiersman magazines, specialized gyrojet ammunition. Things could get really interesting with a Vrusk Pistolero. So I think the Vrusk Pistolero is one of my favorite archetypes to play with, as well as the Vrusk Hustler. I wrote that archetype. I just find the Vrusk an interesting, particularly the Vrusk Criminal, to me is an interesting character to play. So thanks for watching the video. Thanks to my subscribers. You guys are great. And I will see you in the frontier.